Hey, let me start with a financial question for all of us church leaders, and you probably can't answer it as fast as you think you can. And the question is not, what was your giving this past week? You probably can answer that. In fact, you check it a lot more than you admit to yourself or anybody else around you. Here's the question: is your generosity system actually working, or is it just running? Can you answer that question? Is your generosity system actually working, or is it just running? And if any of you said, I don't know that we have a generosity system, well, that's probably your answer. That question, right? That is your generosity system working? And how did last Sunday's giving go? I mean, those questions can almost feel identical just on a Sunday morning, but they are not the same thing at all, right? One of them is producing movement in your people, spiritual formation. The other is just producing some activity that shows up on a balance sheet and your P&L, and it can create a lot of pressure when December comes. And so here's the problem, right? And the problem shows up well before December. In fact, right now it's about July, right? And by the time you get to December, the truth of what's happened in your financial system is abundantly clear, maybe too clear. So today, I want to give you something that you can do starting this week to take a lot of pressure off Q3 and Q4, at least fiscally. And it's not even going to take a ton of time. It might just take you an afternoon. It's not going to cost you anything. You don't have to pay for consultants. You don't have to go on a retreat. No new software, okay? You just your real data. That's all you're going to need, your actual data, and four honest questions. I'm going to give those to you in here in a few minutes. Now, this might be the single kind of highest leverage thing that you can do this summer in preparation for Q3 and Q4 in your church. Now, before we get to the questions, let me just describe a feeling, and you just at least answer to yourself if you recognize it. Okay, it's July. You got the June numbers in. You now have 6 months of data in for the year, and nothing's technically broken, right? I mean, attendance is kind of doing the normal summer thing. We all think we need to build buildings in January, and then we think we need to downsize in June, right? So, the attendance is doing what it always does. Giving, it's okay. It's fine. I mean, it's not great, but it's not scary. It's just okay. But somewhere underneath all of these numbers and metrics, right, something feels, and I want to use the word soft. It feels soft. And you can't point at it exactly. You can't name it specifically. And because you can't name it, you don't really even know what to do about it or do with it. So, like always, though, you stay busy, and church work is always full and busy. And you just assume that the answer will become clear, or you'll deal with whatever that softness is later. Here's what's actually happening, though, in that kind of quiet stretch, especially the quiet stretch of the summer. The gap that's kind of going to hit you in Q4 is forming right now. And it doesn't feel significant today. But it doesn't just form in the fourth quarter. It starts forming in the months, in the quarters leading into that fourth quarter when nobody's really watching super closely because, and you know this, generosity typically follows attention, and the summer is when attention can kind of drop. I mean, communication around everything can get a little thinner, and you take a breath after a big spring, and giving takes a breath right along with you and everybody else. And so the church, by the way, that finishes the year strong, and the churches that scramble in December, they're not separated by what they do in December. They are separated by whether they paid attention and made adjustments in July. In fact, most pastors only evaluate giving as the year is ending. And by then, all you can do is report the gap. You can't lead your way really out of it. So why does this keep happening to, people like us who are capable and well-meaning pastors and leaders? I think it just comes down to one wrong instinct and how we maybe measure generosity. See, we kind of end up measuring the total, don't we? Like we look at the number, the total number, and we feel either relieved or worried, and then we move on, hoping for something to change, right? The total, though, this big number, that's a lagging indicator. It tells you what has already happened, but it does not tell you whether people are moving forward. or stagnant or even moving backwards. And movement, listen, is the entire game here. It's the point of our church. Growth and movement go hand in hand because the heart, and I mean, well, here's the thing that most churches just never do. They treat givers as one audience. Almost every church just treats givers as one large audience, one group, one message, one ask. And they're not one group. As you look at your church on any given Sunday, there's not just one group of people sitting out there, whether it's when it comes to giving or volunteering or any engagement metric. They're not one group, right? People give or don't give from completely different places. And if you flatten them into one blob called givers and then maybe non-givers, you end up speaking to all of them in one single way that may fit none of them specifically. So before you audit the works, you really have to see people in layers. Like you can't audit, like before any kind of audit's gonna work, you have to begin to see what you're auditing. And what I want you to see is how people can exist in different categories. I like to use 5 categories when I work with churches on generosity systems. I'm going to make it a little simpler. It's going to give you 4 of them you can think about today. Okay. The first one is non-givers. You know who that is, but those are the people who attend and they're on your active database, but they have never given to anything in your church, right? You also have first-time givers, people who have given, for the very first time to something at your church, or maybe they gave through your church. And you've got people who are occasional givers. Those are the people who give very sporadically, maybe once a month or whenever they happen to be there, but there's no pattern, right? You've got people who are consistent givers. They've kind of built a habit. And I like this term, you got some lead givers. These are the people who give generously and certainly have a plan. Most of them are using a percentage to drive their generosity. And if you look at the numbers, they're carrying a significant portion of your mission on their backs. So that gives us some layers to think about. Again, the entire model is a little bigger, but this gives us something to kind of begin with, okay? So once you can kind of see these layers, these categories of people, a very important but simple truth becomes obvious, right? A non-giver and a lead giver do not need the same thing from you. And the day that you start talking to all of these people in the same way is the day that you stop moving any of them forward. So here's the principle I would love for you to just think about or maybe even write down because it reframes everything around generosity. And hey, secret, this reframes everything around engagement of any kind at your church, participation in your church. Here it is. Movement, right? Movement is the only real measure of a generosity system. Not the total giving, movement. Movement is the only measure that actually matters. Okay? A healthy system moves people up through the layers, through the categories. A healthy generosity journey, a generosity system helps non-givers take a first step and give for the first time. It helps occasional givers become more consistent in their ministry giving. It helps ministry givers become investors who can become lead givers over time. When this is happening, your total giving numbers, it all takes care of itself. That's not a great metric to be making decisions off of. And you can feel the difference when movement is happening long before the total numbers even change. So when movement stops, you've got a problem. And that problem can hide under a lot of different labels, right? Like a stuck giving base never shows up as a crisis in the moment, right? It really isn't creating an immediate short-term problem. There's no bad Sunday, no emergency meeting. But you know what it does do? It shows up as a slow erosion that you can feel in your gut, but you can't really name on a report. And because it's so quiet, it survives for years inside churches that look perfectly healthy from the outside. In fact, if your giving layers look exactly like they did in January, I just want to be honest with you, you don't really have a system. You just have a collection plate with some good lighting. So let's turn this into something that you can really begin to change. You could even start changing this week if you wanted. Here's what you can do. I'd love for you to pull your giving data, and you got to do that first because I don't want you guessing. Like, pull your actual giving data. Because if you're guessing, it defeats the whole purpose of this, right? And then once you have that giving data pulled, here we go. I promised it earlier. I want you to walk through 4 questions. 4 questions in light of that data. You ready? Question number 1. Which profile got the most communication over the last 6 months? Think about if you were to track every generosity message, every email, every moment from stage, right? And if you were to ask, who are we talking to the most? That answer is going to illuminate something important for you. In fact, most of us will discover that we have spent the year talking to people who are already giving. You reinforced the middle and you have ignored the periphery, the edges. And it really is the edges where the most people have the most room to move and where those people actually are. So, who have you focused on the most so far this year? Question 2, which profile got the clearest next steps? And hear me, right? Communication is not direction. Just because you talk to a profile doesn't mean you gave them a clear next step. You can talk to people, constantly and never once tell them or challenge them or inspire them to do something next. So if every layer got the same generic, and here's the tap to give online, scan the QR code, deal, you didn't really create a compelling next step for anyone. You just gave them a button. So which profile got the clearest next step? And of course, which one really were given no steps? Question 3. And I think this is the one that really can expose a lot. How many households moved up a level in the last 6 months? How many households, if you were to look at movement among some of these categories, how many households actually moved up a category over the last 6 months? How many non-givers, for instance, became first-time givers? How many people who just gave occasionally became consistent? Sit in that number for a while, because I'm telling you, it is the truest thing your data will tell you. And here's the deal. If you're not seeing movement, you probably don't have a working system. Last question number 4. And this is the one that might sting a little bit, but I'm going to ask it anyway, okay? Because it's going to help us move people and it's going to point a little bit back towards us, okay? Here it is. What is the one thing your non-givers need that you haven't given them yet? Now, I talk about this because non-givers are where the funnel starts. If you think about this like a pipeline, non-givers are outside the pipe and we're trying to get them engaged on this journey. And most non-givers, here's the deal, they're not usually stingy. They're just waiting on something. They're waiting on clarity about maybe where the money is going to go, a story that helps them understand the impact it's going to make. Maybe they're waiting on some trust that you just have not taken the time to build with them yet. You need to evaluate the non-givers in your church and decide as best you can, ascertain, why are they a non-giver? What is the obstacle? What's in the way? What's holding them back? And once you figure it out, you have to decide whether you're going to help them remove that obstacle or not. Now, here's the part I love about this conversation. You don't need a new plan after this. Your answers are the plan, right? The profile that you have over-communicated to, you need to pull back a little bit on. The profiles that have been ignored, that's where your second half of the year attention should go. The layer, for instance, that hasn't moved all year or has reduced during the year, right? Gone backwards. Build some really good, clear next steps for people who are in that category, because obviously it's missing right now, right? The thing your non-givers need, get it on the calendar. Maybe every month, an opportunity to take an easy, clear next step. Those 4 answers are going to give you not just answers, they're going to illuminate the plan and the strategy that you can implement in the second half of the year to change the trajectory of where you're going fiscally. Now, of course, you know what's at stake if you kind of skip this and don't do it, right? And I just want to say it super plainly and bluntly because let's just take doing nothing off the table, right? If you don't do anything, you will coast through the summer. You're going to stay really busy. Nothing's going to look broken. So nothing is going to feel that urgent. And then here's what's going to happen. Q4 will arrive and the gap will have grown, but you haven't been paying attention and it's been incrementally getting larger. And you are going to spend one of the most important giving seasons of the entire year reacting to the gap instead of leading from today. And that's the cost, right? It may not even be a dramatic crash, but it's going to be a problem. And the most expensive thing you can do right now is ignore the subtle gap that is beginning to grow. I mean, listen, you can't fix in December what you ignore in July. So this week, right, just block an afternoon, pull that data, run it through the 4 questions I gave you. That's it. Just see what the answers tell you. And if you can run the audit and it surfaces more gaps than answers, that's actually a really good outcome because now you know where to start and what to build. Listen, by the way, this is the exact work that we do inside the Generosity Journey Lab. I do this 2, sometimes 3 times a year. I offer a 5-session leadership lab. Think of it like a cohort with people just like you, with me live, walking you through what a healthy generosity journey looks like. And listen, I know that I'm going to tell you it's great. Of course, you expect me to tell you that. But listen, I have watched churches grow 20, 30% in year-over-year giving. I've watched them add hundreds of new givers from the non-giving category. I mean, this can change the game for you fiscally. And even more importantly, this system that I teach can change how discipleship formation happens around generosity. So if you just go to my website, gavinadams.com/leadership lab, or just look up leadership lab, I would love for you to understand what this could do for you, or shoot me an email. I'd love to share a little bit more. Hey, until next time.